How's it going? I'm Adam David Collings, the author of Jewel of the Stars, a space opera story, and I'm going to read you the first 3 chapters of the book, which introduces you to the main point of view characters. But before I do that, I'm going to read you the blurb from the back cover. Haylee was more confident designing starships than raising an autistic child. Now she just wants a relaxing holiday with her family. But when Earth falls to an alien armada, she knows life will never be the same again. Les was just a cruise ship captain. Now he must rise up and become something greater if he is to keep his crew and passengers alive. Braxton never wanted to leave the Space Navy, but now taking a cruise is the only way to feel the stars around him. This crisis may be his ticket to regaining the life he thought was gone forever. Can they overcome their differences and save everyone on the ship? If they reach unexplored space, they might yet survive, but an unstoppable enemy stands in their way. Alright, let's get into the book. Jewel of the Stars, Season 1, Episode 1, Earth's Remnant. Written and narrated by Adam David Collings. Chapter 1. Les Miller refused to teleport without his hat. As the captain, he had to set an example for the rest of the crew. He rummaged through his suitcase. He'd worn it home from the ship yesterday, so would have put it straight on top. He glanced at the time projected by his eye lenses. 7:15. It would take 15 minutes to reach the spaceport on Toronto Island. If he didn't find his hat in the next few minutes, he'd be late. He moved into the living area. There it was, sitting on the Chesterfield. He picked it up and slipped it on his head. Now he looked the part of a ship's captain, and it covered his grey hair. He headed back into the bedroom to close his suitcase. How had his hat ended up on the Chesterfield? That's right, he tossed it down last night when his brother called, just as he's arrived home. The door chime sounded. Seriously? He had no time for visitors. Les put the suitcase down and opened the door. The man on the threshold had a forehead dripping with perspiration and sporting a short scar leading up to wild orange hair. The guy's rags had a whiff of smoke about them, and wild, bloodshot eyes stared at him. Great. A homeless crazy had got past the security downstairs. "Can I help you?" "Captain Les Miller?" What was that accent? South African? Yeah? "You're on your way to the ship, aren't you? The Jewel of the Stars?" How did a tramp from the street know his name, let alone the name of his ship? A family of butterflies landed in his gut. Was this guy stalking him? He reached his left hand around the doorway and hovered his index finger over the security button. "Who are you?" I'm not important. You can't go." "I can't go where?" "Into space, on the ship." "How do you know so much about me?" Les pushed the button. "Doesn't matter. Something terrible is going to happen." "Something terrible is already happening. I'm late for work, and I'm being stalked by a crazy man. Now, if you excuse me..." He picked up his suitcase. "I'm serious, Captain. There's danger out there. Actually, the danger is coming here, but that's irrelevant." The man clenched his eyes shut, then opened them a second later. "The point is, you'll be better off if you stay here. You might even be able to prevent it." This guy was either insane or privy to some disturbing information. Les bet on the former. He wasn't abandoning his job based on nothing more than vague predictions of doom. There was still a question of how this caller knew so much about Les. Why choose him as a target? "I have no idea what you're talking about." "You will. Don't let that ship leave." Les put down the suitcase and clenched his fists. "Step away from my door." Ding! The lift doors behind the crazy man slid open. 2 uniformed guards stepped out. "Sir, you need to come with us." One of the guards strode towards the door. "Nobody wants to be bothered by you." The crazy man glanced over his shoulder at the guards and bolted. The guard by the lift leapt after him down the hallway. Moments later, the guard dragged the intruder back into the lift. "Don't go into space," the man shouted. "Cancel the flight. Don't let those passengers leave Earth." The lift doors stole anything else the intruder would have said. Les turned to the remaining security officer. Your men need to be more vigilant. If he'd been dangerous, you might have been too late." "I apologise, Captain Miller. He slipped by us. Tricky guy. Not sure how he managed it." Miller nodded. "Well, no harm done, but I do need to get to the spaceport, so if you don't mind..." "Of course. Have a good day, Captain." Les couldn't help but smile. His uniform and rank often impressed people, even though he wasn't military. It was nice to be respected. He glanced at his watch. Stars! He needed to leave. Now. The air around Les fizzed for a moment as he materialized in the teleport chamber aboard the Jewel of the Stars. He stepped out of the chamber, meeting the gaze of the pretty Asian teleport operator, and strolled out into the corridor. He stole a glance at the time display. He'd made it, but he no longer had the luxury of taking his time to ensure the ship was running smoothly. Everything had better be ready for their passengers. The hallways of the crew decks were plain. The raw metal walls and nondescript beige carpet were a stunning contrast to the opulence of the passenger decks. Up here, he could believe he was back on the cargo ship he and Joanna worked on for so many years. She'd have loved it here. Why hadn't he taken her on a cruise back when he still had the chance? He now spent most of his days on a cruise ship, and Joanna wasn't around to share it with him. Fate was cruel. This particular hallway was redeemed by the floor-to-ceiling photo of the ship in all her glory. Passengers of space cruise ships rarely got to see their vessel from the outside, which was a shame. She was a sight to behold, like her ancient cousin in the next photo over, Jewel of the Seas. The older model looked similar, apart from the triangular bow and lack of a warp ring. Les smiled at the images. He was part of a grand tradition. He reached the end of the hallway, opened the door, and swept onto the bridge. Blue earthlight bathed the bridge through the front windows. Crew moved about from station to station, none of their faces betraying the usual pre-launch pressures. They were professional, every last one. Staff Captain Mayor Rice, his first officer, strode forward. "Captain, the Chief Engineer reports minor problems with the electrical systems on Deck 12. "Tell her to get it fixed yesterday. You know my motto." "Yes, Captain," she said. "Everything must be perfect before the passengers get on board. And the early birds will start arriving in minutes." Mayor nodded. "And Captain, Director Malik is on the line. He wants to speak with you." Les dismissed Mayor with a wave of his hand. "Better see what His Majesty wants." He stepped into his ready room and closed the door. The ready room sat directly behind the bridge, and was little more than a closet. It offered him a quiet place to sit without leaving the bridge, but was nothing compared to his main office down on the administration deck. He sat at the tiny desk and pressed a control on his wristband, syncing his eye lenses with the terminal. The communication screen was projected in the air in front of him. There it was, the pending call from Director Malik. He reached out and pressed the receive icon. The screen vanished, and Malik's age-creased face appeared, floating above the desk. "Captain Miller, I'm afraid you're going to have to alter your route for this cruise." "Now?" Les raised both eyebrows. "We're about to leave." "It's unavoidable, I'm afraid. You're not to go anywhere near Alpha Centauri." "But that's our first big attraction. People love to see the landing site on Proxima B." Les tapped an icon, then glanced down at his desk. As he did, his eye lenses projected an image of the pre-flight checklist. He scrolled it with his finger. "They'll have to settle for a view of the Helix Nebula instead." Les locked eyes with Malik. "People have paid good credits for this cruise. If we don't take them to the advertised destinations, you'll be drowning in complaints." "Captain, we've received safety alerts for the entire Alpha Centauri system. Dangerous solar activity, I'm told." "Glory of the Stars was there just 2 weeks ago." "Solar activity?" His ship had shielding for a reason. Was Malik trying to sabotage Les's passenger satisfaction rate? "Yes, and Captain Moore reported unusual readings." Funny, Moore hadn't mentioned anything when they'd bumped to each other at headquarters yesterday. Still, passenger well-being came first, no matter what. Well, if there are safety concerns... I realise this is unconventional, Captain, but it's not negotiable. You let me handle a fallout from the passengers. As you wish. Malik nodded. His face vanished, replaced immediately by the Earth United Cruise Lines logo. Les huffed. Nothing was going right today. Chapter 2. Braxton White took a quick glance over his shoulder. No familiar faces. Good. The last thing he needed was to bump into someone from the old days. The chances of that were low enough in the civilian terminal, but you never knew. All would be fine if he could make it to his gate undetected. The sooner he teleported up to the ship, the better. Braxton gave a long, low whistle. Fancy being here in Sydney Spaceport again. It hadn't changed much in the last few years. Of course, this was the civilian terminal. The military areas were off limits now. Good riddance, too. It wasn't like they deserved him. Something hard collided with Braxton's shin, sending pain up through his leg. A fat man in a Hawaiian shirt hefted a large plastic suitcase. Sorry about that, mate. Braxton glared. In a hurry to get to my gate, you know. Be more careful in future. The bloke scurried off, his shoes clacking on the plastic floor. Moments later, he had another near miss. The idiot was going to kill someone with that case. Braxton's bare scalp tingled in the cool air. They could establish a stable warp field around a ship, but they still couldn't comfortably heat a room of this size. The floor-to-ceiling windows in this terminal let in a bucket load of light. He squinted and made out the harbour bridge and opera house, monuments from 2 centuries past, behind the smaller spacecraft sitting on the concrete. Sunlight was one of the few things he missed about Earth when he was in space, but he'd had his fill lately. Bring on the darkness. A baby cried. Braxton rubbed his forehead. Oh, for the days when spaceports were filled with nothing but the hushed conversations of fellow soldiers. Here it was, all mums and babies and granddads and young lovers. No wonder he'd avoided civilian areas in the past. He glanced at his boarding pass. Gate 23. That's where he'd find the teleport chamber to Jewel of the Stars. Hopefully the ship would live up to her name. Braxton shook his head. How had it come to this? Taking a holiday on a cruise ship just so he could be in space. Well, it was better than nothing. It had been too long. He reached a travelator and moved to the side. Most people stood motionless on these things. He could move quicker walking next to it. He looked behind him. He wasn't the only one who'd opted to walk. A teenage girl with bright green eyes ambled along behind him. She met his gaze with a scowl. Her face might have been pretty if she'd find the effort to crack a smile. Wasn't the spaceport meant to be a happy place? She was on her way to a cruise ship, not the gallows. Braxton snorted. Teenagers. Good thing he'd always had the sense to say single and childless. He touched his wristband, and a small digital clock appeared, floating before him. There was still plenty of time, but he wanted to get out of the spaceport. Why was everyone dawdling today? Surely they'd be eager to get where they were going, especially those joining him on the cruise. Braxton dismissed the clock as he reached the end of the travelator. The gate was up ahead. Braxton White. There wasn't a hint of friendliness in the voice. Braxton's heart seized. He'd been recognised. He stopped walking and looked up. Lieutenant Commander Campbell. Hold on. According to the insignia on the man's shoulders, it was now Commander Campbell. Surely Stokes hadn't promoted this bloody idiot to XO. What an insult! And how humiliating to be seen taking a cruise. He'd once led men into battle among the stars. Now he was playing in them. Commander, Braxton nodded. I didn't expect to see you at the spaceport again. Just a relaxing cruise, nothing for you to be concerned about. Campbell looked him up and down, his face frozen in stone. Well, try to stay out of trouble, Mr. White. Braxton's jaw clamped down. He clenched his hands into fists, but forced them to relax. As always, Commander. Campbell turned and headed towards the heavy security doors that would take him into the military terminal. Braxton let out a long, hard sigh. Stars, what a mongrel. He looked back towards his gate. Thanks to Campbell's interruption, he was now stuck behind the green-eyed girl who was ambling through the crowd, slower than ever. Perfect. Maybe this cruise had been a bad idea. Braxton tossed his bag onto the bed. The mattress sagged under the impact, but it'd be fine. Much better than anything he'd slept on in the military. For better or worse, he was here now. Time to make the most of it, and maybe even enjoy it. Will that be all, sir? The porter asked. Yep, thanks, mate. The porter nodded and retreated from the room. Would he expect a tip? Probably. Braxton tapped his wristband and transmitted the tip from the menu displayed by his eye lenses. Silly American tradition. Or was it European? He wasn't sure. Either way, it seemed just another way to get money out of people. Not that money was a huge problem at the moment. At least his honourable discharge had provided him with a decent pension. Braxton strolled over to the porthole. Nobody could tire of seeing Earth from orbit. Seeing new planets was great, of course, but there was something about humanity's homeworld that couldn't be matched. His finger still lingered over his wristband. Might as well check for messages. He hadn't done so in a few days. He scrolled through the list projected by his eye lenses. Most of it was junk. Hold on, there was a message from Jane, one of the few crewmates from the Hobart who still kept in touch. He opened the message. Braxton, sorry to inform you that the HMAS Adelaide was lost yesterday, along with all hands. We had a lot of good mates on that ship. Can't believe they're gone. There's something bad out here, Braxton. Can't say any more. I wish you were still with us. Jane. Braxton's mouth went dry. Lost. All hands. The Royal Australian Space Navy only had 4 ships, so the crews were all tight. Too many good men and women. Who'd done this? Not pirates. They couldn't get the better of a warship. Something bad, Jane had said. What could that mean? Braxton shook his head. He wasn't part of that world anymore. He needed to forget about it. Leave it in the hands of those still in active service. Still, all those good men and women lost. Braxton turned towards the door. Time to take his mind off everything. The paperwork was done. Les closed the document, stood, and strode onto the bridge. Maya stood at ease, keeping watch. She could be a bit stiff, but that came from her history in the military. How's it all holding together? Les asked. All passengers are present and accounted for. Ship is in position for launch. Warp ring energized and ready. We're clear of Earth orbit. And our course? Locked in for Helix Nebula view. Very good. Les smiled and turned to the navigator. Take us to warp. The navigator nodded and pressed a control. A slight vibration tickled Les's feet through the thin soles. The bridge dimmed for a moment. A blurry white orb glowed through the front window. They were at warp. Les's smile faded. Now, time to face the music. He pressed a control on his wristband, patching his voice shipwide. This is Captain Les Miller speaking. Chapter 3. Haylee Scott stopped in the middle of the red-carpeted hallway and put her finger to her mouth. Shh! If they could reach their cabin without a major incident, she could start to unwind. Her son, Austin, stopped talking. Finally. The captain is making an announcement, she whispered. But, she pointed at him. He fell silent. I want to stress that this decision has been made in the interests of your safety. Ronald, her husband, flashed a sympathetic smile. He started walking again, following the porter, who pushed the cart with their bags they checked in at the New York spaceport. We take this very seriously at United Earth Cruise Lines. United Earth is, Austin said. Elsie poked him in the ribs. Be quiet, Austin. Mom said... Elsie, Haylee snapped. Your brother isn't your responsibility. I'll handle him. Yes, Mom. Elsie's face dropped. She leaned back against the wood-panelled walls. She was a good kid. It was hard enough being the older sibling. Harder still when her little brother had special needs. I'm sure you'll agree that the views you'll soon be seeing of the Helix Nebula are worth the diversion. When will we leave Earth? Austin whispered. Haylee let out a long breath and shook her head. The captain was winding up his speech now. What did it matter? We've already gone to warp. Did you feel that little shake in the deck a moment ago? Austin shook his head. That was the ship entering the warp bubble that allows us to travel outside of normal space. What's normal space? Thank you for your attention, and please enjoy the cruise. Haylee ran her hand through her hair. This was no time for a physics lecture. Try to be quiet until we reach our cabin, okay? They rounded a corner. A large glass door invited children into the playground within. Austin's eyes lit up. Mommy, I want to go in there. There'll be plenty of time for that later. Austin screwed up his little face. No, I want to go in now. Austin, follow us. I'm going into the playground. He reached for the door. Austin! She yelled. Behind the glass doors, parents and children alike looked up, eyes wide. Haylee's cheeks burned. Yeah, they could look. She'd like to see them come out and try to handle him. Some days she wished she could hang a big sign around Austin's neck that said high-functioning autism. Then people wouldn't judge her so often. Maybe. Austin, Elsie said. Elsie! Haylee snapped. Elsie stamped her foot and ran to her father. Ronald turned and walked back towards them. Finally. He grabbed Austin's hand and started to pull the boy along. Austin screamed, but followed his father. Haylee watched as the two walked down the hallway, taking deep breaths together. Ronald had always had more patience for Austin when he was having a meltdown. Sure, Haylee knew all the strategies, but they were easy to forget when frustration set in. The porter was waiting outside the elevator down the hall. Haylee jogged to catch up and fell in step next to Ronald. Try to cut him some slack, hun. His routine is totally messed up today, Ronald said. Haylee nodded. Ronald was right. Mom, will the ship fall back to Earth? Haylee envied Austin's ability to change his mood so fast. No, we're outside of the planet's gravitational field. What's a gravitational field? It's what pulls objects down towards the center of the Earth. It's why you can stand on the ground and not float away. What if we did float away? Haylee snorted. Then I guess we'd all get lost in space. Would the ship rescue us? Haylee bit down, stifling a groan. I don't know, Austin. They reached the elevator that would take them down to their deck. What makes the ship move, Mom? The engines. The porter pressed the call button, his face impassive. Does it move fast? It moves very fast when it's at warp. The elevator doors opened and they stepped in. What's warp? It's a method of travelling faster than light. She pressed the button for deck 15. Light doesn't move. That's silly. It does move, Austin. It's very fast. Where does it go? It travels all about. It travels to our eyes so we can see things. The doors opened on their deck, which was decorated the same as the one they'd left. I'm going to move faster than the light. Then you won't see me. Austin tore off down the hallway in his awkward gait. Austin, Haylee called out. Come back here. The boy ignored her. No running in the hallways, and you're going the wrong way. Haylee stole a glance. There were others in the hallway. Her face warmed. She ran after Austin. She reached him and grabbed his hand, forcing him to stop. You come when I call. Austin pointed out the porthole at the warp ring. What's that, Mommy? Are you listening? You disobeyed me. I told you to stop running. Is that the engine? Austin! Her shout echoed up and down the hallway. Several people turned and stared. Austin's face dropped. Finally. I'm sorry, Mommy. I forgive you. Now come and help us find our room. She dragged Austin by the arm back to the elevator where the rest of the family were waiting. A few voices muttered behind her. Brilliant. Now she'd be the subject of gossip throughout the ship. Haylee tipped the porter and he retreated from their room. The mountain of suitcases was suddenly intimidating. Why hadn't they splurged on full service? Then the porter would have unpacked for them. But then she knew why. Times were about to get difficult. The kids were already bickering over bed choice in the attached bedroom. She couldn't take it anymore. "I've had enough." She slammed the case closed. "You deal with them, Ronald. I'm going for a walk." "What, now? You're going to leave us the minute we get to our room?" "Yes, Ronald." She took a step closer and locked eyes with him. "I need to get away before I burst a blood vessel." Ronald shook his head. "What's gotten into you, Haylee?" She jammed her finger in the direction of the kids' room. "They've gotten into me." "They're just kids. I know they can be hard to deal with, but no, you don't know, Ronald. You have no idea what I'm feeling right now." Ronald stifled a chuckle. "Oh, you're making it pretty clear." Haylee clenched a fist. Ronald was going to get a black eye if he didn't shut up. Ronald's face dropped. "Bad time for a joke, right?" He stepped aside. "Fine. Go do whatever it is you have to do. When you're ready to spend some time with your family, we'll be around." Haylee stormed outside. She headed right, the opposite direction from the people who'd seen her outburst earlier. She tried to slow her breathing, to calm herself. The surroundings were helpful. Paintings hung at intervals on the walls. Portraits of famous people from the history of space exploration. Yuri Gagarin, Neil Armstrong, Miguel Alcubierre, Harold White, and Tracy Young. As an astro-engineer, these were the people Haylee felt a kinship with. Austin wasn't the problem, not really. Her other problems were just making it impossible to deal with him. Ronald wouldn't understand. Well, of course he wouldn't, because she hadn't told him anything. She couldn't ruin the trip by revealing her bad news. Then again, if she continued on the way she was, she'd ruin the whole holiday for the entire family anyway. Haylee stopped walking and sucked in a deep breath. She couldn't do this alone. She needed Ronald's understanding. She let the air out in a long sigh. She'd have to tell him. She'd look for the right opportunity, and she'd come out with it all. Hopefully, it wouldn't kill his fun. Well, I hope you enjoyed that. That was the first 3 chapters of Jewel of the Stars. If you want to know what happens next, then you can grab your own copy of the book at books2read.com/jewel, and it's just 99 cents. You can also get a free prequel story at adamdavidcollings.com/free by signing up to be part of my special email group. It's a great little story. It's a military space opera, and it tells the story of first contact with the aliens that become the main antagonists of the series. So be sure to check that out. And I'll see you in my next video. Live long and prosper.